Hi, I'm Eddie Burke. I've been the bartender at the Hollywood Improv for 40 years, and this is my podcast, Eddie's Bar at the Improv. All right, guys, Eddie's Bar at the Improv is open. Before I get to it today, I really want to thank Mike Carano, who does everything and anything, and without him, this wouldn't be possible. And also Lindsay Rose, who does everything for me that I can't do, which again is everything. So tonight, though, I have a very special guest, and this gentleman is the host of the longest-running comedy podcast called Never Not Funny, which is running since 2006, I believe. He is a veteran comic. He has been on Conan, The Tonight Show, The Late Late Show. He has released 3 comedy albums, one of which was nominated by Entertainment Weekly as one of the best comedy albums of the year. I believe that name was Spirizuda.
You want me to jump in?
Go for it.
Sprezzatura.
Okay. Might have a little language trouble. And
well, it's Italian. It's not a word that you know, so you shouldn't be upset with yourself, Eddie.
I'm always upset with myself, Jim. It just
you and
doesn't
I both.
stop. But anyway, my guest here, as you've already heard, is Jimmy Pardo.
Hello.
And I really thank you for being here, Jim.
Oh, it's my honor.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let's just kind of hop right into it.
Yes.
And why don't you tell us how you got started in comedy?
Well, when I turned 21, I did some open mics. I'll just give the year. That was 1987. Mm-hmm. And I always wanted to do it. I went to Second City right out of high school. You didn't know it. I didn't know you just showed up to comedy clubs to do, stand up or open mics or whatever, or else I probably would have done that. But second, I grew up in Chicago, south suburbs eventually, and Second City seemed like the way to go. And so I went to that, and it wasn't for me, but it also opened my eyes to the world of comedy in Chicago. And
so that's where you started.
That's where I started. I then ended up moving to Pasadena, California. And I lived here for a year, and I went to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, which sounds a lot more impressive than it is, at least for my career. Adam Scott and Paul Rudd seem to be doing great. My critique when I was done with my first year, it was decided mutually between student and teachers and faculty that I should not return. I was kind of an a-hole. I was kind of I took a year off of school between high school and then going to the academy, and I kind of... I kind of had an attitude about me that I was a grown-up and these were children, and it was stupid. I was dumb on my part.
What spurred you? I mean, what made you say, I want to be a comic?
Well, I'm going to get to that, Eddie. Jesus Christ, let me breathe for crying. I'm not really upset. But I'll circle back to that. So then when it was decided I would not return, all of my critiques from all of my teachers was, you should do stand-up. Go back to Chicago and do stand-up. That's where you're going to shine. And I'm told by my mom, who's since passed away, and my dad and my stepfather, that I always wanted to be a comedian. I'm told, and then when I went back to class reunions, I'm told by all those people, like none of them were surprised that I was working at Conan or that I had a Comedy Central special or I was on The Tonight Show. They were like, yeah, of course. Mm-hmm. We knew that in 7th grade. You're not impressing us. If you didn't do this, we'd be surprised. And, it was watching Saturday Night Live. It was watching SCTV. It was my mom and stepdad were kind enough to, if there was a comic on Carson, Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, they would let me stay up late enough to watch the stand-up, which is where I discovered, Pete Barbuti and Steve Martin before he was somebody. And I'm trying to think of some other names, even Gary Mulder, that sort of thing.
Right.
So that was it. So that was it. So that was a long-winded answer to say, I guess I always wanted to be a comic.
Yeah, and obviously you're the only one who didn't know that, right?
Yeah, I think I just kind of thought I was funny. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I know I like making people laugh. I did a lot of it out of survival of being a short kid, getting bullied and picked on. That I'm going to make you laugh, and the girls will like me more than you anyway. And that's what happened.
But look at you now. And isn't that, what's the song? You know, Look at Me Now?
What do I take a look at me now?
One of those comedy things.
Yeah.
So were there comedians that you kind of admired as you were starting?
Oh, yeah.
Or growing up?
Well, to this day, my hero is Richard Lewis. I think Richard is one of the best of all time. But I lop in Robert Klein, Paul Reiser, and Richard Lewis are really the three that I looked up to the most when I started. I throw in Johnny Carson, Groucho Marx, and Don Rickles as well for different factors. Rickles, for his crowd stuff, and Groucho, kind of the same thing. Groucho kind of was doing what Don was doing prior, just kind of insulting people to their face, and they loved it.
Right.
So I put them, but Richard, there was something special for me about Richard Lewis in the time where it was, Seinfeld was the king, where, with the rolled up sport coat and the skinny tie and more observational, Richard was from his heart and talked about his stream of consciously about what was going on in his life. He didn't always find the funny, which I loved. I loved that he would go down a path and he might not necessarily always find it, but you knew right around the corner he would find something else. And I was always enamored with Richard Lewis, and I am to this day.
It's a great guy to be enamored with.
Yeah.
The very first time you got on stage.
Yes.
Feelings
as a stand-up comedian.
Yes.
It was the day after my 21st birthday. It was in Maryville, Indiana, at a place called the Comedy Cottage. It was 2 old hotel rooms that they took the middle wall out and made into a comedy club. And it was the middle of it was the boom. 87 was the boom. So it was jammed on a Sunday night. This format.
Chicago.
This was Maryville, Indiana, which is basically south of about 30 miles south of Chicago.
Okay.
And I felt comfortable going there. It didn't seem like the big city. I felt like I could do this. And they did the show, and then after the show, they had the open mic. And I went up, and I had the people that I worked at. I worked at a mall at the time, managing a record store, and they all came to support and so on and so forth. And maybe they were too enthusiastically supportive, maybe laughing where things shouldn't be laughed at. And but I did pretty well. I didn't bomb. I did well. And there was a very funny lady on the show named Carla Felicia, who now writes on sitcoms here in town and remains a friend to this day. I was not friends with her at the time. I just was this jackass that showed up to do the open mic, and it was my first time on stage. And she's like, she said, "Hey, has the booker seen you?" And I said, "No, nobody's seen me. This was I don't." And I was nervous and scared, and I said, "This is my first time." She's like, "Well, you're good. You should go out to Rosemont, which was the home club, Rosemont, Illinois, and let those bookers see you because you'll get booked right away." And I was like, "Oh, geez, okay." And so I went out there and. Quite frankly, overwhelmed and didn't do very well. Kind of chewed it, and that scared me away. And I didn't do anything again for about a year, and then I came back.
Took a break after the break.
Yeah, so I had those 2. Maybe there was 3 that I did. 3 open mics in the middle of '87, but it really was October of '88 that I really started taking it seriously.
When I ask also about the feelings, like the butterflies and stuff like that, because not being a stand-up comic, I don't get those. So have you ever gotten over those? Do you still get them?
I get them if it's something out of the ordinary. If it's like if I've got to do a corporate event, I'll get a knot in my stomach because it's not going on stage here, which is second nature at this point. That it's a weird conference room or whatever it is in front of people at noon, and I'll get that knot in my stomach. Or sometimes a TV appearance I might get it, but in the club, I never get it anymore, but I used to,
which I assume is a good thing that you do occasionally get it. It's still a shot in the arm here.
Yes, it's a shot, and it's also you're experiencing something new, and you should be a little cautious about something new. You should just go, here we go. In my opinion, I don't know.
Well, I know when I listen to a lot of comics talk, a lot of them say, I always get nervous. And then you get a group that'll go like, well. I know what I'm doing now. Yeah. It's maybe I'm nervous about a joke I tell, but not the same amount of.
Well, I'll agree with that. For me, like here, it's a showcase club. So I'm not. Admittedly, I'm not the best 10 to 15 minute guy. I'm a really good hour comedian because you get to know me and you get to see what I'm doing. But to boil that down to that little spot. So if I do my first joke and it doesn't get the laugh I'm looking for, then that knot will come back in my stomach like, holy crap, what am I going to do? And then usually I work my way through it. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's a rougher set than others. But that's when that will come back up. But never before the stage, which is interesting.
Good.
Yeah.
That's that knot stuff always amazed me because I've not being up, I'm an actor.
You're an actor, yeah.
I've not been in front of an audience like a comedy club where you're naked right there.
Naked.
It's your, I've said this many times. The response is right there. You know if it's working or not.
And you know more than anybody else. I mean,
Yep.
Unless you're one of those guys that hears laughs that aren't there. There's always those guys that come off and go, "That was great." It's like, you didn't get a laugh in 12 minutes. What are you talking about? That was great.
Oh, we have a lot.
You survived. That's all that happened.
Oh, we get a lot of those guys.
Yes.
How did you get started with Conan? Because I believe you still do the warm-ups.
I don't do it anymore.
Oh, you don't?
No, I left I ended up hosting a show on Science Channel that's no longer on the air. But
Oh, okay.
I left. I did that. I got a call for day one when Conan was making the move from New York to L.A. to take over the Tonight Show, and I got a call the day before their first test show saying they want to hire you to be the warm-up comic. And I, of course, my ego got in the way and said, "I'm not a warm-up comic. That's not what I do. I'm Jimmy Pardo." And I said, "But I'll take the meeting." So I went and took the meeting and realized, hey, idiot, it's the Tonight Show and it's Conan O'Brien, two things that you admire. Why wouldn't you want to be part of this team? And then I was there for the 7 months we were on NBC. Then I went back at TBS, and I was there for 7 years.
Great.
I want to say. And it was another one of those things where, like my personal appearance agent, TJ, was like, Jim, once Conan and Jeff Ross and everybody and Mike Sweeney, those guys that are involved are in charge, see how funny you are, you're not just going to be the warm-up. You're a fool not to take this job. And sure enough, I started doing remotes for them. I started appearing in sketches. I filled in for Andy Richter twice when he couldn't be at the show. So Conan trusted me enough to do that. So it was like exactly what my quote-unquote people thought would happen. So it was, and I say with no hyperbole, there's two things that have happened. I'll circle back to one of them, which I'm sure you're going to bring up at some point. But one of them is meeting Conan O'Brien is the greatest thing that ever happened in my career. And it happened late in my career, but I'm grateful that it happened.
It's somebody like Conan, I would imagine, when they take a liking to you, it's quite a feat.
Yes.
And it opens a door or two for you.
Yeah.
And allows you, like you said, you sat in for Andy Richter. I don't know if you ever sat in for Conan.
Oh no, no! I think they would cancel that day. I think they'd take the day off instead of risking putting Pardo behind the desk.
And that's all right. I'll talk to him.
Yeah,
Jimmy.
well, straighten him out.
But and then you went on. You did sketches for them.
Yeah.
The Late Show and the other shows that you did came after this?
No. I did the Late Show and the Tonight Show. I did the Tonight Show with Jay Leno in 2002. Bombed miserably on national television. I mean, just...
Well, we're better place to do it.
Right? And I will say, luckily the internet didn't exist then, because it was a bomb, man. That was... And having done warm-up for 7 years for Conan, I could see how sometimes there's, not like a comedy club, there's bad crowds. Mm-hmm. And my shot on the Tonight Show with Jay Leno was a bad crowd. They didn't like Jay. They didn't like
really?
the guests. And then I was hoping they were going to bump me. They didn't. And I went out, man, and I just chewed it on national television.
It happens. It happens to the best of you.
It does, but you don't want it to, because here it is.
Yep.
It's happening.
It's
My
big
dream
time.
of the Tonight Show's happening, and oh man, I'm getting punched in the gut every time I open my mouth.
When did you first come to LA and stay here and start doing stand-up?
That was 95, and it's got an improv connection. I actually, like I said, I lived here in 86 to 87, and then I came out here once. In fact, I have a question for you, and then this will get back to your question. I came here. I worked for MCA Records, the record company, the record label, and we had one of our, as you guys know, you have the tourists, the tour buses come in here,
right?
And so part of our convention was all of the MCA representatives across the country came to the Improv to watch a show, and I watched. It was Rick Overton and Rich Scheidner, and then a bunch of people I don't remember, but I got pulled on stage by a guy who I cannot to this day remember his name, and maybe you will. he would do a thing with music where he would have the sheet music on a stand, and he would call the audience, bring the audience guy up, and have him play the flute, and then say, "Can you read music?" And the guy would say no, and then he would turn the music around because it was upside down to get a laugh at that guy's expense.
I do remember the guy. I remember the act. I do not remember the name.
It's right. I mean, that's 1988. It's been driving me nuts for, 31 years. I don't know who the hell this guy is.
Well, when somebody listens to this podcast,
I hope they do, because
they'll figure it out. Well, the one or two people that listen to it, somebody will relay it over to him.
Because but that also gave me that it was the Improv.
That was the first
and
time
I'm on
the
stage
Improv
here,
stage.
and truthfully, like when he said to me, "Do you know how to read music?" And I went, "Yeah, left to right," and it got a huge laugh. So that when he then turned the music up from upside down to right side up, it didn't really get a laugh because I stepped on it with my joke.
Right.
But I just was being me. I wasn't trying to upstage him in any way, shape, or form. But and also, I'm the guy, "Hey, that's Jim from the Chicago branch." And he just got, "Hey, it's Jim." And they all wanted to laugh.
Just an innocent Jimmy Pardo
That's exactly
response.
right. I wasn't even Jimmy yet. I was just Jim Pardo at that time.
And this was your first time on the stage.
That was, as an audience member who got called up and just coincidentally got called up.
Well, your first time on there as being a booked comic.
Yeah, so here's what happened. Eric Fagan, who I'm sure you remember.
Yep.
Eric was the booker of Evening at the Improv and also the other stuff here. He came and was working for CBS and went on a talent search. And he saw me in Detroit and said, "Who the hell are you?" Now, what he didn't know is just earlier that month had turned me down for Evening at the Improv. So he saw a tape that he thought blew, apparently. But he saw me live. He's like, "Who are you?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I'm just a working comic." And he's like, "I want to see you again next week in Chicago." So then I went up again in Chicago. And then Eric just said, "I want to manage you." He goes, "If you move to L.A., I will manage you." So I got my life together, and a few months later, I moved here. And then Eric had a nervous breakdown 3 months into that and left the business.
It had nothing to do with the fact that he was going to handle you, did it?
I think it was so overwhelming to handle my nothing career at that time.
Yeah.
But I thank Eric because, again, it was the Improv. I thank him he gave me the motivation to move here and the confidence to move here and the ability to say, "I'll get you on stage at the Improv."
Right. How was your how did you look at the Improv at that time? I mean,
it was the top of the mountain. It was, we've been waiting for you. Bud Friedman at the door at the start of every Evening at the Improv, and seeing all these people that I ended up, either working with or becoming friends with, or
did you get to do Evening at the Improv?
I never did.
No,
I never did it. I was not approved by either Eric or Ross Mark. Neither of them found me good enough to do that. And I hold no...
Two comedy geniuses, I know.
Well, Eric had an eye, or else I wouldn't be here. And Ross put me on the Tonight Show with Jay Leno, so I thank him for that as well. But yes, I'm with you. And I'd heard, the other thing I'd heard, and this was the other thing, to go back about to match with the Conan thing, I had heard from many people, many established comics, Gary Laser, John Rigi, some other great comics, that they were like, "Has Bud seen you? Has Bud seen you?" And I was like, "No, Bud hasn't seen me. I'm not getting those prime 8 o'clock spots where Bud's in the room and bringing people up. I'm getting the late spots." He's like, "Oh, the second Bud sees you, it's going to take off." And like, Bud's got the guy. Bud sees it. And sure enough, the first time Bud saw me, I walked off and he's like, "You got to be here more. You're one of the best I've ever." Like, it was so complimentary.
Oh, great.
And I think we all know Bud. It doesn't happen.
No, it
he does. He's not that effusive with anything unless he's talking about his career.
Exactly. Or greeting a celebrity.
Yes, exactly. So that changed things too. And then I ended up hosting a game show that Bud was the producer on. And
which was, do you remember?
National Lampoon's Funny Money. That's the game show where big laughs get you big bucks, then get you canceled.
And that's Jimmy Pardo, ladies and gentlemen.
That's right. Bud was one of the creators of that game show and wanted me to host it and fought for me to host it. And really believed in me. And he came to my wedding. So Conan O'Brien and Bud Friedman, truly, and I don't even know if Bud knows this, were so important to my career, and I'm forever grateful.
He's very important to a lot of people's careers, a lot of people that don't realize it or don't, just don't see it. But, people like Bud, especially Bud, who's the originator of this whole stand-up scene the way it is right now, are very important. Every comedy club owner period. I mean, you guys know better than I, but they're the ones that put you up. They're the ones that keep you going.
Yeah.
As a kid,
Mm-hmm.
were you like a class clown?
You know, I always, what I like to say is I was the guy who made fun of the class clown. He would do all the heavy lifting. He would be up on the desk doing some crazy dance and getting a laugh, and then I would just make one sarcastic comment in the back, kind of under my breath to make the guy next to me laugh, but somehow everybody heard it, and then they would all laugh, and then that guy, the class clown, would like, oh, wah, wah, and sit back down. Again, it wasn't my intent. I just was being a sarcastic a-hole. Yeah. And so, like, when it came time to, most likely to be a comedian, I was never voted that guy. It was this other guy in high school was voted that.
And yet you're here. And
here I am. And yes.
Do you happen to know of the nickname The Shooter?
Of course I do, yeah.
And so how did you get that?
It is stand-up comedy related. There was a place in Chicago called the Roxy. And it was the greatest place. That's where every Thursday night was open mic. And it was really open mic. It was kind of what Bud was doing back in the old days. It was comics, poets, singer-songwriters, magicians. It was literally an open mic. Which eventually it became almost 100% comedy. But we would go there every Thursday night, me and my group of guys that I started with, Tony Boswell, Jimmy Dore, some guys, Jim Coretti, Tim Reinhardt, who are no longer in the business. And we would go there every Thursday. And then we started hitting the suburban clubs, because that was in Chicago proper. We started hitting the suburban clubs, and the guy that ends up, circling back to what that woman Carla Felicia said to me, that booker, Jay, finally saw me, and he's like, I got to start using you. He goes, are you available this week? And I'm like, I am available this week. Mainly because I'm available any week. I've never been booked in my life. And he's like, well, I need somebody to do... I can finally say this out loud. No, I can't. I'll say it. He said, I kind of got a weak show at this particular club. Will you go and do like 7 minutes after the MC and before the feature act? And I was like, first of all, I didn't know what any of those words meant, but I went, okay, I'll go and do 7 minutes. So I went to do the 7, so in doing so, I had to miss a Thursday night at the Roxy. So I came back the next Thursday to the Roxy, and I walked in, and they're like, where were you last week? I go, where was I? I was at Lassen's. And they all were like, how'd you get booked at Lassen's? I go, what do you mean, I'm a big shot in this business. I'm the shooter. And we all laughed at how ridiculous that was. And to this day, Mike Siegel and Jimmy Dore and Paul Gilmartin, Pete Schwaba, they were all there. And so almost kind of ironically to make fun of me, started calling me the shooter. And now it's just kind of stuck.
And now, Mike, we have a name to call him from now on.
Although I think in 2019, the nickname "The Shooter" isn't the greatest nickname.
It's all right. Don't worry about it. We don't deal in political.
I know it's still comedy based.
I'm gathering from what you're saying that once you started working a little bit, you kind of I don't want to say took off right away, but at the same time started having success. Pretty quickly.
I did. That October of '88, when I really started taking open mic seriously, and then that first pay gig that I just mentioned was in March of '89. I then quit my day job in July of '89. And so we just, literally, it was last week on this recording that I quit my day job 30 years ago to do this full time. I declared bankruptcy at some point during that. I lived out of my car a little bit I did everything that, the cliches.
Comedians do.
Yeah, I did all the cliches. And... yes, I was working every week, Eddie, but I was I wasn't working like the Improv in Chicago. I wasn't working those clubs. I was working kind of the B and C clubs around the country that, I probably should have kept my day job, stayed in Chicago, and continued to do the open mics for another year or more. But I was like, I'm in show business. You're in Portsmouth, Ohio at a sports bar.
But you wouldn't be here now. The trip would have been different.
I think so. You're right.
You're right. You do what at the moment what you think you got to do.
You do.
It's
agreed.
So, and so there you sit, and you're here every week, every whatever. You're still performing at the Improv, and
I still love it. And I still. The truth is this. In fact, because I was just here last night, as you know, I still get that excitement every single time that I get in the car to drive to this club, and even today, my name is on the marquee out front.
Yes.
I still got like, are you fucking kidding me? Pardon my language. Like I'm on the marquee. Like it's the dream of when I was here with MCA Records in '88. It's like I'm now on the marquee at that place where my boss at that time went, well, he's never going to make it.
Yeah,
you know?
right. That's how many times has that been said to people? It's like
right.
the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. Maybe you should go in another direction.
Well, but in this way, they were right. They were like
in the comedy direction.
In that.
What gave you the idea for your podcast?
Matt Belknap, who is my producer and co-host for the past 13 years, 100% him. I knew what a podcast was because Ricky Gervais had one, and that's really the only reason I knew of the word podcast. And I thought it was hysterical what Ricky Gervais was doing. And I was doing a live talk show, a non-televised talk show at the UCB Theater here in L.A. I started with those guys, Matt Walsh and Matt Besser, at that aforementioned Roxy in Chicago. We all started together. They went to New York. I came here. And so when they were opening up a theater here, they were like, hey, we need to fill nights. You know, did you have any ideas? I was like, well, I got a game show idea and I got a talk show idea. I go, but they're great. Let's do them. So I ended up doing, like, at one point I was doing like 3 shows a month there, you know, that had my name on them. And the talk show was, I'm good at one thing, and it's that, you know, I'm good at talking with people. And so this kid, Matt Belknap, who was running an alternative comedy website called thespecialthing.com. He would come to all the shows, and after one of them, he said, hey, do you want to turn this into a podcast? And I didn't know what that meant. And I said, so you mean just like record this live thing and we'll put that out? ? And he's like, yeah, we could try it that way. And it didn't work. That was not the way to do it.
What year was this?
That was 2006.
Oh, okay.
And so we then regrouped, and he and I, and again, this is just a guy that I met him twice. We had a bunch of meetings, as we like to joke about now that we're 13 years in, way too many meetings about having a podcast. We would meet once a week to talk about what we're going to do. And so
Mike will probably tell you that's me.
Do you guys have too many meetings?
Yeah, Mike thinks so.
Yeah, you just sit down and talk. But and now that it's becoming a business, I understand meetings now. In 2006, you didn't need meetings.
Right.
Eventually, we just sat down at my dining room table and started doing it. And I credit.
And now it's the longest running.
Well, I don't know if it's the longest. There's a couple of ones. Keith and the Girl and Dawn and Drew were kind of in there before me.
Comedy.
No, Dawn and Drew and Keith and the Girl
too?
are comedy as well, and they've been around either the same amount of time as me or a little bit longer.
A little bit longer. Okay.
But we're the ones. Todd Glass says it best, and I appreciate it. We're the one that made you know what a podcast was. And that's no disrespect to Keith and the Girl because they've got a great following and so on. Mm-hmm. But we were the one that made like all comics around here go, hey, I want to be on Jimmy Pardo's podcast. What a neat, so you just show up and you're funny? That's it. Right. And people wanted to do it. And then we grew from my dining room table that we got a studio in Sherman Oaks. Then we left that studio to get because that we shared. And now I think the last 6 years we have our own Never Not Funny studio.
Oh, that's great. Where's that?
In Sherman Oaks. Literally like a mile away from where we were sharing one.
Of all the things that you've done and, you know, you're still doing and still going to move on, is there a particular night, a particular job that like when you think about you got, in terms of performance, it was like, this is it. I've done, this is the epitome of what I'm kind of reaching for. And by that, I don't mean like, you know, it's you feel that that's the end. What I mean is there one night that stands out to you the most about all your performances?
Well, there was I don't know if this is the one because I've had a lot of little breadcrumbs to get to something bigger, but the one was, and again, it comes back to Bud. Remember the Johnny Walker comedy competition?
Sure.
In the late 80s?
Yeah.
I was still kind of a green comic, and I went in the afternoon. You'd go up and you'd do 2 minutes in the afternoon, and if you got approved, you went to the nighttime.
To the night. Mm-hmm.
And Pete Schwaba and myself and a guy named Chip Chinnery, we were kind of the green comics, and everybody else on the show were established. Steve McGrew ended up winning the Chicago leg of that contest, but he was like an established headliner, you know, making crazy money and selling rooms out. And And that was it for me. It was like, I went up in the afternoon in front of Bud and a woman named Susan Knapp, and then whoever, Walter Gertz and somebody else at the Chicago Improv in the afternoon. It's like, well, these people are all in the business, and they all liked what I saw. And Chip Chittery, Peach Bob, and I all walked outside and started hugging. Like, can you believe this? Can you believe, like, they chose the three of us to move on? And then we all did okay at night. Like, all of a sudden, when the big guns really showed what they could do in front of a full room, we all did fine. But it kind of was that moment of, Bud and everybody saying, you guys got it.
Yeah, and they know who you are.
Yeah. Now, again, it took another, that was 88 maybe, or 89, I believe that was. It then took until 96 or whatever for Bud to really, like, I'm sure Bud doesn't remember that at all.
No, I'm
in fact,
sure
he probably
he
doesn't remember me in 96, but it wasn't like, oh, Jimmy Pardo's moved to town, guys, clear the way. I had to prove myself here.
Don't feel bad, because I had to work here 2 years before he even knew my name. It was like, bartender, get me a drink, and it's like, finally, after 2 years, I felt like, thank God.
Right.
I'm no longer just, hey, you.
Right.
So I can imagine with the comics who he just sees sporadically.
Paul Gilmartin's got the great story where he was doing, it was an APA showcase. And so they had 2 nights here at the Improv. And so let's say the first one was on a Wednesday. Paul was on stage and killed and walked off. And Bud's like, oh, that was fantastic, young man. What is your name? Paul Gilmartin. Paul Gilmartin. I'm going to remember that. And then the very next day, Paul walks in. Out of the aisle, sir. Do you have a ticket? Like, I'm the guy yesterday that you said you loved.
Oh,
so, but in fairness, he sees 100,000 of those guys a year, certainly in that time.
And back then, when Evening at the Improv was going, they were seeing tons and tons of comics. So the fact that he even remembered the guy his name that night.
Yeah, right, exactly.
That is a plus in itself.
Yeah.
You did Last Comic Standing.
I did.
And what year was this?
Oh, boy. Hang on. 2005.
Okay.
It was awful.
So that was that was like one of the first years then. That was
It was
beginning.
maybe year 3. It was the one that Bill Dwyer ended up being on the series. So it had turned from nobody's going to do this to say, oh, Dat Phan's selling out arenas. We should all do this. And then we all decided to then do it. And I was, and I publicly talked about this before, I was asked to do it. I said, I don't want to do it. And they were like, do it.
Do it.
Do it. Yeah, with the wink of, come on, dude. You're going to, let's do this. And I ended up doing it in Chicago because I was there for my dad's wedding. And they were like, oh, even better. We're gonna get somebody from Chicago. And I had a killer set. I mean, I blew the roof off the place and then did not move forward. And
really?
It was, and my wife was also on that show. My wife was also on the finals in Chicago, the beautiful Danielle Koenig, and hysterically funny. And so the two of us both killed, and neither of us got chosen. And it was like the drive back to the hotel was like, well, what the F do we have to do? We can't be funnier than that. And so if the wink is there, like, do it, you're going to make the TV show. What the hell just happened? And
you never came up with the answer because there is no answer.
Well, you know what the answer was at the end of the day? That we were just normal-looking people, and they had already cast the normal-looking people. I think that's what it came down to. Because I think it was like John Roy, a bald guy, had moved on, and
a real character, somebody that
exactly. And Nikki Glazer actually came out of that. That was where Nikki might have been like her 3rd time on stage.
Oh wow, that's a pretty good lineup there with you and Nikki and John Roy.
She was a child, Nikki Glazer.
Yeah, she had to be. She's still a child.
I know it. She's still a kid. But yeah, so then to have that horrible experience and then go, well, good, that's out of our lives. Oh wait, no, it's going to air. And they aired it. They edited it. I knew the producers, and I get an email like, "We took care of you in the editing." I'm like, "I hope that means you cut me out," and because I don't want the world to know that this happened. And they're like, "Oh no, we give you a lot of screen." So here's all this Jimmy Pardo screen time where you got to go. Well, here comes Pardo's going to win this thing, and then I stand there like an asshole when the camera hits me, and I'm like devastated that I didn't win because it was like a punch in the gut.
Well, that is really strange. I mean, they're going like, all right, Jimmy, like, we are just plastering you all over the place. unfortunately, you're not going
You're not
on.
going to go on. And then, so here's social media, which was very young at the time, but still attacking me of, hey, what's it feel like to lose? Like, God damn it, I already went through all this in the car ride and flight home. And it was not a good experience. And again, I blame Ross Mark. I don't really.
That's good. Well, I mean, you got to blame somebody. Yeah. You mentioned that fan that won the first season, I believe, and it was kind of funny. I don't know if you remember, and this has nothing to do with you, but the story just popped in my head. Ralphie May was on that.
Rich Voss.
Yes, Rich Voss, and that fan who was not the funniest of the group ended up winning because everybody on there picked on him.
Yeah,
and he became America's little sweetheart.
Yeah.
So America's voting, and they're voting for him. The poor little kid is just like, everybody's picking on him. They played hide and seek with him, and they
didn't go look for him.
They didn't look for him. They just left him there
Yeah.
while they all ate and drank or did whatever.
Well, he
It was
stayed.
like,
Did you remember, Eddie? Do you remember when he came out? And I feel horribly, but really, so he's there for an hour.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Doesn't think to pop his head up maybe at the 10-minute mark to go, what's going on? Waits an hour and then comes out and goes, what's going on? And they go, oh, we stopped playing. And he goes, I'm never playing that with you guys again. It's like, you didn't play once. They hit on you. They got rid of you.
Well, that's been a stepping stone for a lot of comics.
Oh, yeah.
When you did it and they aired that, did you get a lot of response from it?
Not
Even though you
really,
didn't
because
win?
I didn't win. It really, and if anything came from it, I don't remember that because all I was doing was dwelling on the negativity.
Yeah.
And, but, I know for the folks that, John Heffron and Tammy Pescatelli and Alonzo Bowden and the folks that, did well, John Reap,
Right. Mm-hmm. And Eliza Schlesinger.
Schlesinger. I mean, that changed changed their lives.
Yeah. And some of them didn't win, though. I mean,
Right.
I would imagine because of social media, a lot of that's changed in the sense that, let's say the number 2 person is still hilarious.
Right.
It's now on social media, their stuff is blasted all over the place,
Yeah.
and they still do well.
Right.
They still get response. They still want people to see them.
Yeah.
The rest of your career, Comedy Central.
Yes.
The special that you did on that.
Yes.
It was very, very well received. And
Thank you.
where as let's say a layman asking a comedian, do you come up with all the jokes, like, let's say, from your life experiences? Do you just kind of like go, this may be funny?
I think it's both. I'm not Seinfeld. I'm not a technician. I can't really,
Whoa, wait a minute. I thought we were interviewing Jerry Seinfeld.
Oh, Jesus, I do apologize. Okay, what's with you people? There, that'll make you comfortable. Jerry was the best comic of that generation and a great technician. That was never me. I'm a crowd work guy. Before the crowd work's become a thing now, I was doing it before that, and that was kind of what made me unique and interesting, and which made it hard to, put me on the Tonight Show. And I had to fight upstream for all of those little spots on TV, Craig Kilborn, Craig Ferguson, and even the Comedy Central special and I appreciate you saying that it was well received, because even that was, well, stick to your material, dude. You would get all these notes, stick to it. Like, yeah, but that's not where I shine. I shine being in the moment. Yeah, don't do that. Don't. But the Comedy Central one, what happened was I was on the heels of that. It happened, Tonight Show was on the Friday, of February something of 2002, and then I shot my special the following Tuesday. So I just chewed it on the Tonight Show, and then immediately have to do this special. And I was like, I'm not going to let that happen again. I'm going to be me. And so I don't care what Comedy Central says. If they can edit it, whatever they want to do, I'm going to do me, and let them work around that. And so I had a great set. And
how do you prepare for, like, since you don't have, let's say, a prepared set, you probably have a general outline.
There's a skeleton,
of where you want to go. Do you just work off the people?
I do, and hope to God that they're receptive. And early in my career, I was just mean to people because I didn't know how to do it with a wink. Whereas now, luckily I have fans, and and I say that very gratefully, that they sit in the front because they want to be Pardoed, quote unquote. They want to be the guy who gets asked questions so that they could be
picked on or
yeah,
what
like when I
have
saw
you,
Don Rickles and he made fun of me. It was the greatest day. Are you kidding me? You want to? I saw Don Rickles. Danielle and I were sitting. We were in the second row, and Don Rickles comes down from the audience and he goes, "What's your name?" And I go, "I'm Jim." And he goes, "Get out of here, Jim. I need to talk to her." and I laugh, ha ha. And then Don goes, "I'm not kidding, Jim. Get out of here." And he picks me up and walks me out, and then sits down next to Danielle and quote unquote flirts with Danielle. And it was the greatest. And people are like, "Well, did you try to be funny?" No, that's not my job. My job at that point is to be an audience member and laugh my ass off.
Right.
So that's kind of what's happening now with my shows, where people, they come to the front, they want to be there, and they want to have that treatment. But to answer your question about how do I get ready, I would bounce around and do sets, and scripted sets, and they're okay.
Yeah.
They're okay. They're not great. They're okay. When you say I need a 25-minute, stay with your script set, it's a 7.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm even kind on that. It might be a 5.
Well, I think it's very smart of you to, after the experience on the Tonight Show or wherever, to just go hey, this is what I am.
Yeah.
And either stay with me or don't.
Right. And I may not have done that, Eddie. Had the Tonight Show gone amazingly well, I probably would have went, well, no, of course, the material speaks for itself. And then done my special differently. In a way, the Tonight Show set up the fact that my special could be me.
Right.
And again, that's 2002. We're almost on 20 years ago for that special, which when I look back at that now, I want to punch every television in the world so nobody has the chance of witnessing that thing.
There's very few people that can do that from what I've seen. I've watched guys on stage try to work the audience, and 99% just can't do it. I mean, you can do it. Jimmy Brogan. Jimmy's, he lives off that too.
By the way, I saw Jimmy Brogan when I was here. He was on that show. When I was here in '88 with MCA Records, Jimmy was on that lineup. Mm-hmm. And I then wanted nothing more than to see Jimmy Brogan stuff. I thought Jimmy, this guy's just working the crowd. This guy's amazing. And so then, because I couldn't remember his name, I kept on watching clips of Jimmy Breslin. I think he's a news reporter. The writer.
He was a reporter, I think, for the New York Post in New York.
I would see him and tonight Johnny's got Jimmy Breslin. I'm like, that's my guy. And I would go, boy, he's not as funny as I remember on the show. This guy's kind of a dullard.
Yeah, and he's a little bigger than.
It was so confusing to me. So then when I'm now friends with Jimmy Brogan, which I'm grateful for, but. It was hysterical that it took me years to figure that out. But when people do crowd work that shouldn't be, because a lot of young comics will say, "Hey, I got to work out my crowd work." No, you don't.
No.
Work on what you're good at.
Right.
You don't need to do crowd work, and you're just going to swing and miss.
I know.
Listen, if I could write crisp jokes, I would freaking do it.
Yeah, there's a lot of little notes you can give to people starting out.
Yeah.
The insecurity is unreal. I've told this story before when I was listening to open mics in the lab. You'd get somebody that would come up on stage, and look, God bless everybody. They're all trying their hardest. They're doing their thing, but lo and behold, several guys would go at some point, "Why aren't you laughing? That's my best joke." And of course, me being the quiet bartender that I am, would yell out, "Well, you may as well get off stage then, because you're done if that's the best you got."
Right.
And it was and the point being, you don't say that.
Right.
I understand.
But I know I was guilty of it as well. I was like, well, that's.
I know.
Yeah.
But it's a lesson. You know better than I that everybody's got to learn. You don't tell the audience, "I got nothing else, but I'm going to go on."
Right.
Because
that was the best. Now listen to what I don't even consider to be very good. So stay. Yeah, you're exactly right.
How long you been married, Jim?
I've been married 2004, so that's 16 years.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys have kids?
We have one little boy named
That's
Oliver.
Right. I met him.
You met him the other night.
Day, yes.
And he is he's hysterical and he's funny and he is the light of my life. He truly is. And
yeah, he looked like a really good-looking kid, and he said he wanted to follow in your footsteps.
Yeah,
so
and which I'm doing everything in my power to force him away from that. At the same time, he's funny, so it's kind of like I want to support it. But I brought him here. He used to come and see me do Conan, the warm-up at Conan, but that's a different bag. He would see me do that. This was the first time he saw me in a club, and I selfishly I taped it Not because I had to hear me do crowd work. I know what that sounds like. I kind of wanted to hear him as an insecure dad to see if he was laughing, and just to hear his little laughing over my set was like, okay, he thinks his old man's okay.
Yeah, and he's got a whole different perspective, right?
Yeah.
Of no longer like, my father's out doing comedy, whatever.
Yeah, he got to see it. It was kind of the same as my dad, who never really kind of initially, in fairness to him, my mom and stepdad would come and see me when I first started, and I would always kill. And whenever my dad was in the room, I would tank it. And it was, kind of like you want your dad to be proud of you. So I think the nerves would get the best of me, and I would bomb. So my dad kept on saying, what's the fallback? What's the fallback here? Because he never saw me be funny.
Right.
So my dad came out to visit in, what was it, I guess 95 or not, right after I moved here.
Did your dad ever do stand-up?
No. My dad was a drummer in a band back in the day. He was Peter Criss and Kiss. No, I'm kidding. But my dad.
Moving on.
He came, and my roommate Pat and I, Pat Francis at the time, who was a very funny comic as well. We were roommates, and he would see us go to the open mics at night, or go on auditions, and him coming and spending 3 days with me is what made him go, "Oh, this is what you do," and it turned him around completely. Where all of a sudden, instead of kind of going, "What's Plan B?" the plan was like, "What's next?" And
Good.
that's kind of what I kind of felt like with my son the other night. Of now you get to see, you may see me on TV and he's seen that sort of thing, but to see me in my environment was cool.
A unique accomplishment for any kid.
Yeah.
Where when you're going into the arts or what have you, and your family is like, you're out of your mind.
Right.
You need to make sure you keep going to school and become a lawyer. And
Right.
if you want to do this stuff at night, that's fine. But in the meantime, you need to go to school and you need to back up. And when your family finally goes like, wow, this is what you do, now I see it. It's got to be a moment of ecstasy, really, in the sense that my father now is backing up. Yeah.
And it made all the difference when we were doing a week of shows of Conan in Chicago, and my dad came to see a taping we were at the Chicago Theater, which is, I don't know, what is that, 7,000 people, 5,000? I have no idea how many it is, but it's thousands upon thousands. And the very first thing that happens is that the audience sees Jimmy Pardo, and I walk out to a cold audience, and I got these people laughing, and after that show, my dad was like, I can't tell you how proud I am. And it was like, this was, this one show made it worth it.
That was it.
Yeah.
That's like I said, that's got to be a moment that you will cherish forever. Because
it is, it's our dad.
Yes.
My mom was very proud of me too, but it's like, you want that.
You want that validation.
You want the validation.
Yeah. From
you
your
want
parents.
the bully from high school to get it, and you want your dad to get it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Does Danielle still does stand up?
She doesn't really do stand up as much. She's been writing for the past, I guess since Oliver was born. So the past 11 years, she's been writing on TV.
Because all of a sudden the name Danielle Koenig is resonating. That I remember the name.
Well, she used to go up here. It's pronounced Koenig, by the way, and I'm only correcting you because she'll kill me if I don't. She will not kill me. She doesn't care.
Yeah.
I don't want fans to go, why didn't you correct your wife's name? Who cares? I care. She is just recently chatted about maybe coming out and doing it again. And she should, because she's great, and she's very funny. And she used to go up here all the time.
Yeah, because I'm fairly sure I remember her name.
There's no question.
From there. What projects are you working on? Anything in particular right now?
I've got the podcast, as we talked about, and I do a second podcast called Playing Games with Jimmy Pardo, which is a game show, which I love hosting game shows, and I love doing that. So that is available as well, where we have, it's kind of a half interview, half game show. I have a celebrity on, I chit chat with them, and then we take phone calls, and those are the contestants.
And on what is it? Never. Your comedy podcast,
Never Not Funny.
Never Not Funny.
Yeah.
The names just go.
Right. It's okay.
It's what's a theme in general?
You know what?
Everything and anything.
The best way I like to describe it is that it's morning radio without the bells and whistles. Although we seem to be adding bells and whistles, so it's it really is just a fun hang, and not unlike crowd work. Not every podcast can be just a fun hang. I think that people should have a theme.
This has been a fun hang. I love this.
Right? This was wonderful. Mm-hmm. And I'll say to your listeners as well that they got to listen to every episode of this. This is, I think it's long overdue, this idea, because I was telling my wife Danielle that you've seen it all. and there's nobody better to be hosting this show than you.
Well,
So
thank you.
and I'm honored that you asked me to be part of it.
Oh, are you kidding? I appreciate it. I'm honored that you're here. I really want to thank you for being here,
My honor.
and good luck in your endeavors.
Thank you.
And,
Oh wait, we got to talk about this. That you and I were on the Army show together.
Oh my God, I didn't even remember that.
Yes.
How long ago? Oh,
That was
jeez.
1998.
Wow.
And I remember you were there, and I had been doing sets here,
Oh,
but I still
my
was nervous and
God.
scared. It's like, that's the guy from the Improv. And so, like, you were kind and nice, and you were like, hey, Jimmy, and trying to talk to me. And I was
Oh,
like,
gee.
in my own head about, no, that's the guy from the Improv. I don't know how to talk to people. And it's great that, here we are almost 20, it is 20 years later,
Yeah,
21
it
years
is.
later, to be friendly.
The Army show. Wow, that God. I don't even have that on my resume anymore.
You should add it to your resume.
It's like it's
Or it
funny.
fell off.
Yeah, one or the other. But wow, it's funny that you bring that up. It's like, who else was on that thing? Do you remember?
Brian Posehn, Dave Higgins,
Oh, wow.
Bobcat Goldthwait directed the episode that we did.
Jesus.
Yeah, it was.
It's amazing. I guess I've just worked so much.
I know you had
these
that
things just kind of like, go in and out of my head.
Whereas I'm
so-
the opposite. I've acted so little that the Army show is still front of my mind.
Well, 1998. That's a long time ago.
It is.
But again, Jimmy, thanks a lot.
It's my honor. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it
Oh, I'm
so much.
thrilled that you had
It's
me.
an honor.
Thank you.
Again, I want to thank Mike Carano and for everything he does, because he's the one teching this thing and doing this thing and helping me with my logo and everything, and also Lindsay Rose. Eddie's Bar at the Improv is closed. We'll see you next time.